Thank you for being here. My name is Drenman, and I'm the department head of Department of Advertising and Public Relations. So as you know that we start promoting this week because this week is our 8th annual National AdPR Week. So we lined up different events, presentations, panels, and webinars for you to be engaged throughout the entire week. So yesterday was AdPR Giving Day, and we hit the road to have 50 donors in 24 hours. So yay, that's a great accomplishment. So today, we are having a great panel with 4 amazing and accomplished leaders in public relations, in advertising, in media, in communication to join us. And this panel is sponsored by the Female Quotient. And here on my right end is Emily. Emily graduated in 2019. She started with a public relations major, right? Yes. Then switched to psychology, not too far from us. So I'm honored to have all of them to come here to join us. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this mic to our panelists and also to Emily to kick off today's panel. Thank you for being here again.
Hello, good morning, and thank you to Dr. Drenman and to Missy Hill for putting together such a powerhouse panel for us to discuss closing equality gaps in PR and comms. My name's Emily Moody. I have been with the Female Quotient for a little over a year now, and I am a University of Georgia alumni. UGA was such an integral part of my growth as I transitioned from college to the working world. It started my journey towards understanding equality as it relates to life and as it relates to work, and the Female Quotient allows me to continue that journey towards understanding equality through experiences just like this. And you might be wondering, what is the Female Quotient? Well, the Female Quotient is an equality services organization that creates spaces for women to have conversations about equality in the workplace through our pop-ups, through our partnerships, and through our thought leadership. Our founder and CEO, Shelly Zalis, started FQ because she believes in the power of the feminine to rewrite the rules of the workplace. She understood what it meant to be a lonely only, and through her work to connect with others, built a network of over 700,000 women, both online and in person, who support our mission to change the equation and close the equality gaps. We are so thankful to be here at UGA's Grady College and are excited to continue this relationship for years to come. I'll be around the space if anyone wants to connect or has any questions, but if you're an introvert like me, then you can connect with us online through our social channels, through our newsletter, or through any of our events. Now, on to the real reason we're all here for this excellent panel lineup and discussion. So I'm just going to read the panel description for you all. If communication is the human infrastructure of everyday personal, public, and political life, how does diverse leadership ensure that our communication efforts reflect a narrative of a world in which we all want to live? Women undoubtedly bring their own unique qualities to leadership, so what can we learn about the effectiveness of the feminine approach? Together, we'll discuss and share advice from professional journeys, best practices, and other important industry information for emerging comms and marketing people like yourselves. We're going to start by having all the panelists introduce themselves, and please don't mind me while I'm over here taking notes. I'm just as excited to hear the wisdom these women have to share as you are, and I want to make sure I retain as much as possible as we guide the conversation. So, Candii, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Candii Woodson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and currently I work at AT&T. I'm the Director of Media Strategy. What does that mean? I lead up all the strategy for paid media, and so that's all the TV buying, radio, digital, you name it, I lead that up. I've been in the business for almost 20 years. I don't look it, I know. And in addition to that, outside of work, I created and founded a women's organization called Miss Pack Light, which is near and dear to my heart. And it's really about women and empowerment of women. And outside of that, I also have a podcast called Miss Pack Light in Color, which is about amplifying the voices of Black women in our community.
That's so cool. Hi, everybody. I'm Mee Kim. I am the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Omnicom Public Relations Group and the Brand Consulting Group. That means I work with 24 different agency organizations in public relations, public affairs, consulting, brand strategy, and market research. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a cisgendered East Asian woman with dark hair and a dark blouse.
Hi, my name is Roma Patel. I am from Atlanta. I majored in communications and hospitality. I started off my career at Universal at the point where Universal and Warner Brothers were creating this partnership with and really launching Harry Potter from like an experiential marketing standpoint. I interned, I think I had over 8 internships during my undergrad, so I highly recommend internships. It opened up the doors to a lot of the jobs that I had early on. From Universal, I went from Coca-Cola, Fitness Magazine, I worked at Goop, Chrissy Teigen's brand, Cravings, and now I've launched my own brand called Tajari, and we just launched in Whole Foods. So it's a very interesting.
girl.
Yeah. So I would say there's a lot from just women support, marketing, PR, things like that, that we're really eager to get into today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Ebalobo, and I sit on the global communications function at the Coca-Cola Company. I, like you, sat in your seat years back, so I listen to panels just like this and discuss topics just like this. And now it's a little surreal to be talking to folks like you, listening to the panels I listened to when I was a student. So excited for this conversation and thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. So just to kick us off, taking a look around, I'm seeing a lot of women, and in fact, public relations and comms is women dominant. 72% of PR professionals are women, but only 30% of top-level positions in the field are held by women. Can you each share some of the challenges that you faced in managing aspects of equality and diversity in these senior roles and how that affects company profitability?
I'll kick it off. So I would say the biggest thing that I've faced as a challenge once I kind of entered into the leadership ranks was not only trying to spearhead for my team diversity and inclusion throughout our work and day-to-day and within the operations of the agencies or the companies I work for, but also trying to do that for myself at the same time. And so that could be a challenge when I'm trying to break barriers for myself so I can help those that is on my team. And I would say that that could be in ways I didn't always do things perfect. I learned from them, but I think that helped later on me going through that to set the tone for those that came later. As far as profitability, one of the companies I worked for, advertising agency, I was tasked with starting a new division within the agency. And one of the things that I noticed within there is they had part of their hiring process was part of culture interviews. So it was, do you have the skills and do you fit in within the culture? And what I noticed over time is culture seemed more of, do I like you? Do you look like me? Are you someone that I want to hang out with? Versus company culture in itself. And so over time, what I did, I helped to spearhead within the organization new hiring practices of how we recruited and the type of questions that we asked within the culture interviews. And I had the most diverse team in the entire agency. And that was kind of like the staple of what things could be and what it looked like. And I think they realized over time that when you have a diverse employee base, you have diverse thoughts, that creates innovation. And so in turn, that ends to be profitability for the company. But if you're stuck in the same way of doing business, the same way of thinking, you're not going to spearhead anything. And in advertising, you have to be in innovation if you're going to make it as a company.
I'll just piggyback on what Candii said. So when you just look at study after study after study after study, diverse, equitable organizations, they outperform other organizations on every measure. So it gets a little bit tiresome. Like, why? Why do we keep keep having to talk about the business case. Just by show of hands, who in this room would love to work for an organization where everybody is exactly the same? Nobody? All right, who in this room would love to work for an organization where some people get paid more than another group for no reason other than they happen to be the dominant group? Who would like to work in a place where like you don't get to feel included because maybe you don't follow the same football team, or just kidding. Everybody should love the Bulldogs. No, but seriously, like, what about if you're somebody who doesn't follow football, and so you don't get to be part of that conversation on that Monday when you're coming back to work? Like, who wants to be a part of an organization where if you have, you're not part of the dominant culture, that you're not included? Anybody? So truly, diversity, equity, inclusion truly does include everyone. And if all of the best and brightest who are in this room does not want to work for an organization like that, that I think alone just shows how important it is for organizations to practice in a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive way.
When I was working at Coke, one of the leaders, Wendy Clark, I don't know if you had a chance to work with her, but she was incredible. And she had said that if you're in a meeting room and if you look around the room and if you don't think that it is made up of society, whether it's race, gender, just like whoever's in the room, you can walk out. Like, you have to be in a place where you're having conversations with people that you think are adding value, are bringing new ideas, new innovation as you're coming up with marketing campaigns. And I think that was really powerful advice, because it just allows you to look up, look around, ask questions, and make sure that you're inviting the right people to have these powerful conversations, because that's really how it's going to move your business. Or when you think about really impactful PR campaigns or things that you are emotionally invested in, to see like, okay, how can I connect to this? How do mass, like global people, how can we bring the conversations together?
For me, I think it's the inclusion part that it's really difficult to solve for, because oftentimes I think of it as a flywheel, right? Like, we have these aspirations that we want to achieve because, for all the reasons Sumi just mentioned related to the business, right, profitability, et cetera. However, if any of the bits of the flywheel don't do their part, then it stops. So as I think about culture, which was also discussed, that bottom-up kind of thinking of, I own part of this culture, and as such, I need to be part of the solution wherever I am in the organization. So how that manifests will be different. But for me, in this kind of mid-manager role at Coke, it wasn't too long back that I was those folks. So for me, I see it, because that recency is so near to me, I see the talk track that could have helped me, right? So oftentimes I reach a hand out for young associates to try and figure out, one, what can I learn from them, but also what can I teach them? But that needs to happen at individual levels in order for that flywheel to keep happening. And I think that oftentimes, especially as a young professional, you just think it's going to get fixed for you, right? You're like, oh, the world's going to get better. And when I'm in the workforce, it'll be much better than what it was before. But that creates a almost apathetic way of approaching ownership to this topic. So for me, that evolution of understanding my role in enabling an inclusive culture that then propels more diversity, that could challenge our thoughts when we approach a campaign, when people are suggesting things and you're like, I don't know if that really reflects the values of the community we're really marketing to, et cetera. So there's a lot of complexity to it, but a lot of opportunity there. But I think ownership for me was an evolution of where I can be a part of the solution.
Now, Sunmi, like you said, it's obvious diversity majorly impacts profitability. And Candii, you were talking about changing and spearheading hiring practices. So getting deeper into that, what can media companies and communication firms do not only to attract and change their hiring practices, but retain these diverse leaders?
You want to start first?
Oh my gosh, so many things. There's truly so many things. So here's, I think, where we start. I think there's a lot of barriers to progress. And I think part of it, we're going to get into so many things here, but one is just microaggressions. Microaggressions in the workplace, like all of the time. And often folks are like, oh, I didn't even know what I said, right? And so just being more educated, I know people get a little bit tired of implicit bias education, but there is a difference. There is a difference in terms of what we say are our stated values and then what we actually do. And so there's so many just like snap decisions that we're making on just an everyday basis that affect people, especially when you're not part of the dominant culture. So microaggressions is one. I think the other part is like our organizations are filled with really good people, like really like fantastic people. But here's the problem with really fantastic people. Oftentimes, they are too busy with the real work to think about diversity, equity, inclusion. They're too busy being performative, so like short-term, thinking short-term, oh, it's really not that bad. And I think often, like, even just like our friend groups are not integrated. The study is a little bit dated, but there's a Pew study from 2013, so I hope that things have changed. I really, really do. But it just shows how like we really live very segregated lives. Our neighborhoods, our schools are more segregated than they've been pre-busing. The places of worship, if we go. So then it's like, okay, hopefully we can get to the workplace, and that might be a place where we can feel like a team, maybe a school like this. But in that study, it really showed that our friend groups are not very integrated. And in fact, if you are a white American, your friend group is the least integrated. It's like 9 out of your 10 best friends are of your same race. So if we don't even understand each other, like at a personal friend level, then how are we supposed to go into these organizations and then create these campaigns, these programs, et cetera, and really just then become like a focus group of one based on our own experience, whether it's our workplace policies or the creative work that we do. So I'll just go there. I'm sure there's lots more. I want to give more people space.
Yeah, I can add on to that. That was super awesome. I think about attracting talent, and I think about where I'm at in my career. And so when I look at certain companies, I go and look at what their C-suite looks like. What does their executive board looks like? Is there diversity on there? No, I don't want to work there. Because I love your bottom-up approach, but then what's happening from the top down as well, right? And so if on a senior level there isn't diversity, how are you supposed to infiltrate that into our organization? And so I found a lot of times, one, that alone, that affects recruitment. You know, other people are doing what I'm doing, looking around. But also with retention, it's very hard. Like you said, it's very complex to do the inclusion part. And it's very complex when people are stuck in kind of their work and their ways, and unconscious bias happens all the time within the organization. And so people get passed up for promotions. People get passed up for those opportunities that will help them get the promotion. I read a study a while ago about how women sometimes get passed up for promotions because they always get put on the task that doesn't have the high visibility. Right? So you have to make sure, even as a woman navigating the space, that you are doing projects that you know that are going to get that high visibility from leadership, and not those projects that are on the side that when the budget gets cut for something, they cut the project that you're working on, those type of things. And so people leave companies just because that inclusion is not happening. They speak the diversity, they do all these workshops, but people don't feel like they can come to work and be their authentic selves.
And I'll say, as a woman, you're also additionally judged on your likability, and all of that. I think in terms of like even performance reviews.
Yeah.
You will not get as much feedback on your abilities, but you'll get a whole lot of feedback on how likable and what your personality is like.
I think for me, there's a level of also understand. There's a top down is important, but also as I think about my journey, so I'm half Asian, so culturally I think about things differently as it pertains to how I speak up in a conversation. And an often piece of feedback that we get, and my wife, she's also Asian, she gets this feedback all the time. You don't speak up enough, and all those bits, right? And I think for somebody, oftentimes I get that feedback from people who aren't Asian, right? And I think this illustrates the cultural nuance that's in play in how we operate in the workplace, because we don't, it's almost like there's an invisible culture that we didn't even know we needed to know, right? And my wife and I often talk about our parents didn't teach us any of this. Didn't teach us how to have a conversation about pay, where I'm not requesting X, Y, I'm just trying to understand. And I think it's been illuminated in the past few years for me is be in a place where you're trying to understand gets you much further in retaining talent and attracting talent. And additionally, in doing work where the organization, net, everyone feels good about that work. So I think there's a humbleness to approach associates as they develop, but there always needs to be leadership buy-in that this is important, right? And then once that's done, then let the people, and however that's enabled, to have that kind of one-on-one, like build a network where people are enabled to grow, develop, et cetera, but also recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Because if we don't, then I think we miss a lot of talent who are trying to be high-performing, but they just don't recognize the how, because the how they were taught was different.
I'm really interested in the direction this conversation is going, so let's face that. Each of you have accomplished really inspiring things despite the obvious hurdles that exist for women when reaching for those top-level positions, like ability, nuances, microaggressions, biases, invisible cultures. How did you use your authentic self to achieve your goals of high visibility without conforming to the mold of success that's been historically accepted? Did confidence play any role in those stories?
I would say for me, I would always raise my hand. I think it's making sure that you're speaking up. You're like, there's no task that's above you, right? So if you're a coordinator, if you're just starting off, or if you're a SVP, I think you need to make sure that you're just assisting, supporting, getting to know people on a very individual level. I think that's very important. And I think going back to internships, I think that taught me a lot very early on as you start off your career, to have that confidence to build those one-on-one relationships. One of my managers told me that she's not a mind reader. So if I want to achieve certain things in the next year, that I have to speak up and tell her. Or if there's like any sort of one-on-one kind of personal goals, things like that you're trying to achieve, no one's going to say, okay, here you go. Like, you can get to a VP level in like 10 years. Like, you really have to work hard, and you have to be transparent and talk and really use these types of forums, or like go to networking events and start to build build those relationships. And I think mentorship is so important, and having mentors and being a mentor and just like helping people along the way, because I think those types of relationships really go a long way.
For myself, I'll be honest, I had a level of confidence, but I didn't necessarily have confidence in self. For a while in the beginning of my career, I simulated to what I thought it was supposed to look like. What is this role supposed to look like? Who am I supposed to be in this space? And I did what they call code switching. And I would show up to work a different person than I truly was. I would say, hey, yeah, I know that song. I didn't know that song. Like, I'm singing along like, yeah, I know it. There's a big part of our business that could be very social. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know that song. I don't know that artist at all. And I think it took time for me to really kind of carve out that space for myself and get comfortable with who I am. I had to define who I was and who my brand was. And so I say to all of you guys, spend that time thinking about that now. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to show up? And that's okay. Like, who you are is going to be valuable to an organization. Everybody plays a part and everybody plays a role. And I love how you said, for example, you might be quieter in the room. So when she says something, it's probably really important when she finally speaks up. I speak all the time. So that's who I am. And people might want to tell me to shut up. But I show up as my authentic self. And I think I finally gave myself permission to be myself. And then I kind of poured that into my team, allowing them to be vulnerable and leading from a place of vulnerability myself to allow for other people to feel open to being their authentic selves at work as well.
I will say for me, I am confident, and and there's a reason for it. It's not that because I think I'm so great or anything like that, but I can never really talk about myself without thinking about the generation before me because I am a daughter of immigrants. And so my growing up was kind of an intersection of three areas. So my father was a professor at HBCUs all across the South. A lot of my schooling was in predominantly white schools. But on the weekends, it was Korean churches. It was often we were in cities that were near military bases, so it was biracial. But like on the weekends, I got my Korean Wakanda on, so I know where I come from, who I am, and so. If anything, I would say, like, as I got older, I'm like, am I not supposed to be confident? Am I not supposed to love myself? Am I not supposed to love my name that everyone keeps, messing up? Am I as a woman supposed to, like, be inferior? Or am I, even in the way that I think, am I supposed to, like, not... I will say, coming from a more collectivist culture, if we don't think before we speak, we get stomped. So the idea of just being very thoughtful before we engage is like part of my culture. But then I will say I feel like public relations, that's not always appreciated. The person who speaks loudly and bursts out the gate can think quickly on their feet, even if they're wrong, often gets to get more of the attention. So I think there's always that inner dialogue, or even just like outer voices that are trying to, whether if you are confident to like take you down, or if you aren't, to like figure some things out. So it really does take so much of connectedness with others to help you really, again, see yourself and who you are and operate as such.
I love that. Yeah. For me, it's been an evolution. I would say that for the longest time, I thought the volume of work would allow me to show my value to the organization across all the work that I did. And then you start to recognize that an organization, whether that's an agency or corporate, the work, it's done by the people, and the strategy, it's executed by the people, right? Like, so interpersonal relationships are really important. And for me, that small talk that would happen all the time, especially early in my career, I had just come out as gay, and there was many coming outs all the time for me, which was really scary because I didn't know any gay people, females, in PR, let alone, a mixed Asian person. So it was a calculus that would always occur when I would have conversations with people, because I was calculating, is this going to be a net positive or a net negative for me? As I went through my journey, I started to see and engage with more people like me. There wasn't a ton, but I found them. And then you see the individuality that they are exuding, and they're still successful. And it starts to build some confidence in me to challenge that status quo. And now I would say, Coke is the first place that I'm 100% fully out. That wasn't the case in my previous roles, not because it was looked down upon, but I was doing that calculus. Additionally, I know that I'm white passing, but I was born in the Philippines. Culturally, I am more Filipino. But for the longest time, especially when I first moved to the States, it was people wanting to put me in a box, right? Because they wanted to define and easily categorize who I was as a person. And I think those shortcuts, we need to continue to challenge them in order for that inclusivity to occur. But for me, I would say that being authentic is a continuous evolution. In the past 10 years of my career, that's only been reinforced for myself. And I'm sure that I'm going to evolve again, right? But net, I think as long as you are just trying your best and you have a vision of who you want to be, that's a good North Star.
So we've talked so far about some more traditional skills and talents that you can bring to work. Roma and Debbie talked about interpersonal relationships, and soon me and Candii, you shared about confidence in self. Are there any skills or talents that you've learned that you wouldn't necessarily picture when you think about careers or PR and comms industry in a traditional sense?
I've been really into learning how to learn, and really trying to figure out, like, when I say who you want to be, the skills that you want to have. Like if you were to take a step out of body experience and you were to develop yourself in the best version of yourself, what are the skills and aspects of the things that individual would have? For me, especially starting early in my career, there were things that were given to me and I'm like, this is scary. This is really scary. But then if you frame it in a way that I'm not as good yet, this is going to allow me to get better and better, and it becomes less scary. But that's very intentional for you to frame it in that way, to take that step back, to challenge yourself that you have a difficult thing to try and learn here, whether that's, having divergent conversations with stakeholders that may not agree with your point of view. But you go and you do it, you learn. And I think that curiosity and trying to understand yourself enough to know how you learn will be important, because in communications, oftentimes you become the expert to the public. So that there's a curiosity that's needed and an ability to learn those subjects and topics.
I can maybe piggyback on that, because I think about growth mindset, right? And so if y'all are familiar with growth mindset, Carol Dweck, there's a book. But as I learned more about what a growth mindset is, right? So the fact that we're not fixed, right? I felt like I grew up fixed. Either you're smart, you're not smart. Pretty, you're not pretty. You're this, you're not. And not thinking you can grow into anything. And I also felt the weight of representation, right? So I can't try something that I stink at and then try to continue to grow. So for a large part of my life, I wouldn't try things that if I wasn't naturally good at something, then I was probably not going to do it at all. But with a growth mindset, it's you know what? You can be free to really stink at something, but knowing that you're just going to continue to get better. So I think that would be something that I wish I had more of, that I didn't learn till much later in my life. And then the other thing I would just say is to think transformationally versus transactionally. I think there's so many things in our society that it's you do stuff to get to the next thing, right? And so I remember when I first graduated, my first job, we had to network. I was in technology, so we would be in like these rooms of like all, like mostly white men, and then our job was as technology PR people, so like to go in and network with people and get like at least 4 business cards before the end of the day. That's super uncomfortable as a young recent graduate. And I remember just like, oh my gosh, how long can I hang out in the bathroom until I can just be done with this? Because I really didn't have anything to say with folks that I didn't have that much in common with. The difference, I will say, now, many decades later versus then is, I don't think about like, oh, can I get 4 business cards? Oh, can I do this because I'm going to hopefully get your business? Or, that kind of thing is just like, I'm curious about this world. And so that means I'm pretty well read. There's not too many topics that I don't have at least some, at least a cursory understanding of that we can have a conversation. So I think when you're curious and you care about people as people versus like, what can I get from you now or even in the future, then things totally change. I think it just becomes so much more natural to form relationships versus like when we're thinking about like what can we get from a situation. And I think that's something I would recommend.
I remember when I was sitting in your seats some ages ago in college, and I believe he was the CMO of Michelin came to speak to us, and I'll never forget the quote that he shared with us. And he said, "Kudos to those who are flexible because you could never be bent." And I have taken that throughout my career because marketing moves fast, things change quickly, and you could work so hard on a campaign and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're cutting budget, we're not going to fund it. And you're like, man, I worked so hard on that. But having that flexibility, right, throughout my career has allowed me to pivot when I needed to from positions or promotions or jobs, but even throughout the organization, it allowed me to be able to be nimble. And you need that in this type of career, in this business. And along with that, it also kind of morphed into resilience. And I'll just say, being a woman and an African-American woman in the South, resilience is absolutely, it's just something that you learn and you embody, but I think that's something that everybody can benefit from, and that's just overcoming any of the challenges and things that come and barriers that come in your way, and being able to look at them as opportunities versus, oh, there's challenges and this sucks. It does suck, but looking at it as an opportunity, and to your point about growth, this is an opportunity. This is presenting itself to me for an area for me to grow and become better. And always looking at it with a glass half full, and that level of optimism has always been truly key to me. And then lastly, emotional intelligence. I didn't know what it was titled until probably about 8-something years ago. And I actually took a course at Emory on emotional intelligence, and leading with that is like my superpower. That's my superpower. And most times they tell you as women, you're emotional. Well, yeah, okay. I'm a little bit emotional. I'm a little bit passionate, and I can get my team fired up. This is what allows me to inspire them. And so using that as my superpower rather than something that is like, oh, you throw like a girl. No, using that as my superpower and really just like honing in on it and kind of investing in how I manage my teams and throughout the organization.
Very early on, I would always try to hide my age because I wanted to be taken seriously. So when I first got my first coordinator job, it was out of college, but I went through at Coke. I think I was senior director at 27, but I was very robotic when it came to personal life. I didn't tell people that I got married or anything really personal. But then I started to become a bit more okay, as I'm building my team, I wanted to connect with people personally. I wanted to understand what they were going through, because you need to understand what people are going through to really connect with them and help them along the way, whether it's personal or professional, right? So then I started to open up, and now I have 2 boys, and I do talk about them, and I do understand like how it is to integrate work and life and all the things that come. I mean, it's chaos. Like life is very chaotic, and I think that that's really important. That you want to ask questions, you want to listen, you want to have some boundaries, but you also want to be open and transparent and human. I think before there was a lot of books around like leadership and how you have to be a certain way, act a certain way, but I think like those boundaries are now so much more open, and I think people can be their authentic self, and that changes, transforms. You're going to change as a person, you'll change as a leader, but I think that you just have to go along with the journey and really start to create value and come up with a company culture that you're really proud of too.
So far, we've been discussing careers in traditional media companies and communications firms, but there are absolutely more paths to success, as you all well know. And I know that the skills that we've been talking about so far are definitely transferable: growth mindset, curiosity, flexibility, resiliency, emotional intelligence. But for the panelists that have ventured outside of the realm of corporate work and into the world of entrepreneurship, so Candii, I know you mentioned your podcast, and Roma, I know you as well. What skills and learnings have supported you as you started your own business?
So Tajari is a plant-based protein powder. I launched that in 2020, right before the pandemic. I did not study food science. I'm not a dietitian. So it was a lot of curiosity, a lot of learning. I actually partnered with UGA's Food Innovation Group to even learn what it takes to come up with like a formulation, get it approved, actually launch a product. So I would say it's a lot of learning, a lot of Googling, a lot of asking questions, a lot of just like reaching out to other founders as well. I think when I first launched the business, I didn't even know like the steps that I was taking. I did like this Tajari as a side hustle. So I was still working full time. And like nights and weekends, I was trying to come up with ways of like, okay, how do I create a business? How do you create a brand name? How do you create a website? Like all of those things. And I think that you just have to have passion. I mean, that's really where it stemmed from. It's named after my boys. I combined their names. So it's like a very passionate story. It's something that and even like at Coke, I became so aware of nutrition. And it was like the opposite of Coke, right? Of how do I think about I mean, Coke is amazing. I had the best experience at Coke, but I had a very tough pregnancy. I was gaining weight, but the baby wasn't gaining weight. So the doctor was like, you need to up your protein. So like, how much protein can I have in a day? So I went to Whole Foods and I went through like all these like different protein powders, and either they tasted really gross or I just didn't like the ingredients. So from there, that's where I started to become like, okay, there's clearly a problem in the market. How can I solve it? And then from there, launch the business, and now we're in Whole Foods. So I think that there's a lot that once you're passionate about something and you're bringing your full self to it, you want to actually grow, develop, and try to make something better. You find a way and you just do it.
Love that. That's so cool. So I started Miss Pack Light, my women's organization, I think in 2018. Don't get me on that. In 2018, and I started it for the very reason of what we're talking about here is I wanted to provide a safe space for women to have real conversations, right? Because I saw that in the workplace, it was very hard for people to bring their authentic selves, to share their challenges, because everybody's trying to act like everything's perfect and they don't want to bring, their challenges to work. And so I wanted to create a space for women to have these real conversations. And I remember, and I started it while I was working, and I'm still working full time. And still running the organization. And I knew how to put together a strategy. I had already started a division up in a company, so I understood about structure and P&Ls. And obviously marketing. And so I knew how to kind of put those things together. And I also knew people, right? So one of the most important things about this business is the people that and connections that you know. And so I knew someone who was good at branding, and so I called her up, and she worked on my team. I called her up and I said, hey, she didn't work for me anymore. I was like, hey, I'm starting this thing, and I know you're really good at branding. Let's brainstorm and work on this. And so I was able to also outsource and use some of my relationships with other people who were doing side hustles too, and help each other, right? We were helping each other in that space. And so those relationships helped me also to build up my women's organization. And then I started my podcast in 2020, when all the social injustice really was kind of hitting the world really hard. And I wanted to, again, provide a space to have real conversations about things that were challenging within the African American community, but specifically for women and how they navigate that space. And so we had some really, really deep conversations about things. But again, I didn't know anything about a podcast. But then I knew, again, relationships. I knew this person that knew a person that started a podcasting studio. And so then I called her up and asked a lot of questions. And she even had a course, and I took her course. And to your point, she's like, you just sit there and learn. The Google is the greatest thing ever. Google everything. And there's the Google. The Google is the greatest thing ever. And so you use your resources. And that was one of the things I also tell some of the junior folks that I help mentor is be resourceful. Like, you might not know something, but the Google does. The Google does. Just Google it, look it up, and kind of try to figure it out. And so I think when you're really, truly passionate about something, like Roma said, you really just dig in and you figure it out. And so I think that's something that can transfer regardless of whether you want to be an entrepreneur. But if you do want to do something, it transfers across all roles.
And what's your podcast called, Candii?
Miss Pack Light and Color.
Catch me listening to that while I go to Whole Foods and get some protein powder. As women, we know the importance of lifting as we climb. What are the key ways in which others have supported or mentored you along your journey, and are there any ways that you're paying it forward now?
I'll start. So my first kind of job, similar, who was talking about internships all through college? I did. Yeah, I did it too. I interned everywhere. But unfortunately, when I got out of school, I couldn't find a job. I'm like, what is this? I interned everywhere. And so I went back to school and worked on my MBA. And when I was getting out of my MBA program, I got an internship at the Atlanta Braves. And how I got it was I actually interned for the Gwinnett Braves when I was in college. And so I had a body of work that I could share. And so there was a lady who I worked for at the Atlanta Braves and as an intern, and she took me under her wing. She truly did. And so she was showing me the ropes, and when I was messing up, she pulled me aside and had some harsh conversations with me, so get it together, girl. And so I know her to this day. Actually, she was at my wedding 3 weeks ago. I just got married 3 weeks ago, and she was at my, thank you. She was at my wedding, and it came full circle because when I started doing some professional coaching, my coach asked me to go reach out to someone who made a difference in my life, and I called her up, and that's how we reconnected. And so then she became a member of Miss Pack Light, and she was coming to some of our events, and she had just gotten laid off, and she met someone there, and she ended up getting a job at Delta. And so it just came full circle. She did for me, by me stepping out on the limb and doing this, it helped her. And so she had me crying at my wedding saying, she inspires me. And I'm like, no, you inspire me. So we had a whole little moment. But I love how she paid it forward, and it came back to her eventually at some point in time. And so it's like always you, even yourself, is in a position to help someone and to reach out. And I say I learned so much from younger people now. Man, like, you guys are so fiery and so passionate, and I love how young people are just like challenging things. And so I think we have just as much to learn from you as you do from us.
So I'm hesitating just with talking here because I'm thinking like, okay, who are the folks that have been most instrumental in like my career? And in a couple of cases, it's like white men, people who have power, who saw something in me maybe that I didn't even see in myself. But then later in my life, it has been really a lot of, actually of a lot of hues, women. But I think so much of that is connected just to the power dynamic, like who has power and who has the ability to use that power on your behalf. I think when I think about like the whole kind of like lift as we climb and the whole kind of like reach up, reach back, I think it just needs to get to a place where it's just instinctive. Like I honestly don't even think about like, oh, I'm helping this person. It's just like, of course I'm going to help this person if someone's going to reach out, and we are able to, connect. In most cases, I'm going to do whatever I can because because it's become the lifestyle of just how you think and support. Because I too have been a beneficiary of so many people who have poured into me, sometimes intentionally, sometimes just by them being who they are. So a big reason I am in the role that I am today in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. Prior to that, I was at agency my whole life in comms, doing technology PR, leading a practice. And I remember if you, this is, you all are students, but if you go back to the summer of 2016, there was just so many unarmed black men that were being killed at the hands of police. And I remember, because I'm the beneficiary of a very diverse office, is that that summer, and for a period of time, like especially the black women in our office were just in mourning. Nobody said anything. Everybody was doing their work, heads down, but there was definitely just something really, really different about what our office was like. And I remember our managing director at the time, white woman, just brought everybody into the conference room. And it wasn't perfect, it was kind of clumsy and all of the things, but we were a group that like, we care about each other, we do. And so people just took the opportunity, like, what's on your mind? And we're also an organization where like tears are very much normalized, and it's not sad tears or weak tears. Like sometimes it's like angry, pissed off tears, and that just means that we care. And so that was probably one of the most pivotal times in my career of just being in a space where we all loved each other, cared about each other, wanted to learn more about what folks were experiencing, and people were very open in sharing who they were. So I just know that I'm the beneficiary of people who are willing to be their authentic selves, that in spaces where people would allow folks to be their authentic selves. And so I think in that way, like mentorship and just wanting to bring people up just becomes really kind of second nature.
I think there's a variety in terms of what people need in order to excel. So back to no one size fits all, and to Sumi's comment about that spectrum of service that is given to you for you to do what you need to do. For me, that gamut has ranged from an Asian American leader who just acts differently. And then I'm like, wow, that's a model that I have not seen before. To, a black gay woman talking to me saying, don't forget you're also Asian, Debbie. And you're just not gay, right? Like those conversations, that's time where said person has learned those lessons, and in sharing that lesson with you, what you do with that lesson will depend on what you want to achieve, et cetera. But that spectrum for me has allowed me to understand the levers that I have to be able to give back. So I listen to K-pop in the office, like I'll do the things that people are like, oh, what? No one else does that in the function. But I see great benefit, and not just for me to feel purpose because I'm living authentically, but for the little Debbies, in the past that were searching for folks like me. And then I see folks navigating, not really understanding where to go. And I've reached out and said, you want to have a conversation? I don't know everything, but I'll tell you what I know. And I think there's a proactive and almost kind of passive way that we approach lifting. For me, I think that's been illuminated in my journey.
Well, we wanted to leave ample time for questions. So as we wrap up and give you guys some time to think of anything that you might want to ask, my burning question to close us out is, what advice do you have for emerging communications professionals? If you had to just say like 3 sentences, what do you wish someone would have told you when you were starting?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Questions, I think oftentimes we're afraid to speak our mind because we think it's a binary. This is what they think, this is what they, it's like one or the other. I think if you get really good at asking questions with the intent to understand, you can do a lot of different things. So that's one. 2, I think relationships are key, and not just the transactional kind. Just care for people and don't think about it like, okay, I have a goal, I need these people to achieve that goal. If you have a goal and you see your path forward, as long as you are consistent, you will hit that goal. Don't take shortcuts, just try and figure out how you be a good person, how to live the life that you want to live, as, again, your North Star. And then live that life in your workplace. I think that will pay you more dividend than anything else. And just try your best to be yourself in however that manifests itself. I think have confidence in that. And there's some people that won't like it, and there's some people that will. And you just have to recognize that spectrum and don't shy away when that spectrum doesn't necessarily, in the positive side. So that was a little bit of a babbling, but I hope that that was coherent.
I would say interview companies as much as they're interviewing you. So ask questions around retention. What do you do to grow people? Try to speak to other people in the department even. Go on LinkedIn and see how long people are staying or their growth opportunities. I would also say, ask questions. I feel like that's so important. Do not stay quiet. Just keep asking questions. Make sure you're passionate. If you feel like you're not learning, or if you feel like you're just you don't want to get out of bed, there's something wrong. You need to be really passionate about what you do for work, because you spend so much time in a given week working, right? You need to make sure that you're bringing your best self to work too.
I probably got a couple, but one is this. I went back to this idea of purpose. I think when you know who you are and why you're here, everything becomes so much easier. It makes decision making really easy. Mm-hmm. I have a little PowerPoint that I have of myself because I had a few years ago, coming into this role, a lot of different opportunities, and I needed my own rubric for how I wanted to make decisions. And so I wrote down this is what I want to do in my life. This is my objective. And so my objective is I want to change an industry. And so when I had opportunities okay, this is going to take me out of the industry. It's going to be probably more lucrative or whatever. But if my goal is this, then this is where I need to be positioned. So it just makes decision making very easy when you know what you're about. But sometimes you don't know. And I totally get that. So if that is the case, follow your curiosity. Just truly care about other people and issues, and it just takes you into spaces where you start to learn a lot more about yourself. And then if I can have one bonus one is be your own hype person. Your hype, I'm fortunate that I have people who tell me things like, my first boss, Soon-Mi, you have a great name for media relations. I'm are you kidding me? Do you know how many times I have to spell my name? How much people avoid my name? All of these things. But him just saying that one thing made me think a little bit differently about what I thought was something that made me feel really, really different. So just be your own hype person.
I love that. I would say it's okay to make mistakes. A lot of times we try to lean towards perfection. Instead, we should be leaning towards excellence. And I think in excellence, there's an opportunity for you to make mistakes and to learn from those, and that's okay. A lot of times we kind of paralyze ourselves from doing things, making steps, especially when you're starting out in the industry, because you're scared that if I make a mistake, then something's going to happen. And I think, most people, if you learn from them, it's okay. Negotiate. Negotiate your salary, period. Point blank, period. And it doesn't have to be salary. It could be vacation days. It could be benefits. But negotiation is always on the table, and we need to do more of that. And I learned that from working with some white men because before I was just like, oh, you're going to pay me this? Great. This is awesome. No, negotiate. There's always room for opportunity to be able to do that. And then lastly, act like you've been there. That's one of the things that someone a long time ago also shared with me. And that's really embodying that goal where you already want to be. Act the part, dress the part, do it before you even get there. And then when you get there, especially from a manager, it's like typically we want to see you showing the skills before we kind of promote you to that place. So you have to already start trying to embody that well before you get that, and just believe in yourself.
Okay, well, per Roma and Debbie's advice on asking questions, we are gonna open the floor for Q&A.
One of the values that's been a common theme in today's discussion was flexibility. So how do you maintain flexibility in times of frustration?
Well, I'm huge on preparation before you get to the place. So it's kind of like training. You're training for something, you're training a muscle. So one of my biggest things is, and I know this just doesn't totally sound professional, but it's self-care, honestly. Taking care of myself, having a daily practice of where I'm in a space and place where I'm feeding my body, my mind, body, and soul. And so when I come to work, I can show up as my best self. So I don't get flustered by the changes in things and when things are happening, because I'm present in the moment. This is what's happening. This is what we got to deal with. Okay, cool. This is the decision. So I don't allow myself to always get razzled and dazzled by the things that come up, because I have a spiritual practice and self-care that I do on a regular basis that allows me to kind of have that peace and kind of evoke that in at work and on my job.
And I would say just being agile and pivoting. So whether it's budget cuts or if there's things that you're just like shifting priorities or any sort of like business goals, you just have to like take a deep breath and you're like, okay, it'll be fine. And you just have to look at it and say like, okay, what are the steps that I need to do? So I think you can be emotional if you want, but like making sure that you're digesting it and then figuring out the next path forward.
I think science has shown that if you feel like you're under threat, your decision making is compromised. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes for me, I've learned that whether that's through meditation, just certain things that allow me to have that center is really important. So oftentimes work will get crazy and those fall by the wayside. For me, I've learned a lot in the past few years about being disciplined about those activities that recharge me, because then that allows me to insulate my mind in a way where that feeling of threat is lessened. So, but I think that will depend in a lot of different variables, one of which is what point of life are you at and what do you need to recharge you? Mm-hmm. And then understanding that in that uncomfortable moment, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for being here today. Before I go into my question, but one of you mentioned that you're going to change as a person and you're going to also change as a leader. And I found that quote to be very interesting, and I just would like to know how you have changed as a leader and also how your definition of leadership has changed.
I remember how it was before.
I know, me too. It's interesting. I love listening to these incredible women next to me, and I wish I could have a little bit more of your zen, because I will say because I was thinking about your question about flexibility and frustration. I will tell you, it's like so much of like my growing up and even into my like early parts of my career was that I had to be that model minority, right? And I had to represent. And so that meant, excellence, but also that I wasn't necessarily leaning into the things that make me different and who I am, or even just like my anger. So my self-care, I heard Nicole Hannah-Jones talk about this, like her self-care is revenge. I feel that. My self-care is revenge too. My way of revenge is more of an internal injuries kind of person that like, you don't know that was me, kind of an approach. But I now kind of later in my life and into my career is like I recognize like my like sense of like justice and what it should be right and fairness for other people. It totally drives me, and it's something that I was not as in touch with earlier in my career. And so I'm not necessarily trying to be flexible in those cases. I'm trying to be smart. I'm trying to be strategic, but maybe not as flexible as I was when I was like earlier. And I would also say, like in those really, really frustrating moments, I have to like here's my little secret. I'm not as nice as I seem. And what I mean by that is like I have, no, I mean, there are moments of like, you're so frustrated because you know, like this campaign or this whatever you're working on, like it's gonna be game changing. But you're around people who aren't as visionary or they're just more kind of scared and all that kind of stuff. But you have to like totally fight against what all these things are telling you, like, no, even though you know it's right. So here's my little secret. I love typography, and I will put like nasty words, whatever it needs to get through the day. I'll put it in poster form, put it around me. I have keychains that say like, not today, Satan. But it is like, yes, I will have to kind of like hype myself to get through certain battles like that I know it's the right thing and just to persevere. So I don't know if that was a good answer, but.
It's the truthful answer. Yeah.
It's your truth. So it's a great answer. I would say it's funny that you say all that you say because I think I've become more zen as I've gotten older and progressed in my career, because the other way put way too many gray hairs in my hair, and so I think I changed in that way to be more zen. I still am super passionate, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I stand up for what I believe in, but I try to do it in a way that I speak out when it really matters, and in a way that people understand, okay, this is what I'm passionate about, but always connecting it back I'm really about people and what's best for people. And so that's how I focus and how I try to show up. And so I tie everything back by like, how does this impact my team? How does it impact people? How does it impact our customers? And really kind of like caring about that has been something that has kind of like transitioned me, because before it was really about, going up the corporate ladder, and I was very ambitious, still very ambitious, but I was just like, I gotta get up there. And then once you get up here, you're like, this is it? And so then you have to find something else that drives you and that motivates you, and it was the people that I connect with and interact with every day that really drives me and makes me want to come to work and work hard.
Love it. Yeah, I was the same way of coming from big corporations to now being a founder and CEO of my own business is a drastic change. So when I was working at Coke or Universal, you would have like your managers, or you would have HR, or there would be like specific steps of your job. But now it's like I've been able to mold that for myself. So like people who work for me, I've been able to come up with what are the things that I really enjoyed, like as I was progressing in my career, what are the things I just like, it was like a waste of time, and then like coming up with like what my own company culture should be. So there's a lot that I've learned, and then a lot that I'm still learning. So like when it comes to asking questions for people who work for me of like what will better you, like where do you want to see yourself, things like that, and like really having those kind of like guiding principles to see like, okay, that's how I would like to run my business.
I think for me, it's been illuminated that the more authentic you are and you can connect with people, the better you are at leading. And I think that's not necessarily because you become mispopular or whatever it is. It's because people now, you've enabled an environment of trust. And I think for me, I've come to recognize that an environment of safety was integral for me to grow as a leader. So the intentionality in ensuring with younger or even older associates that I'm always trying to get input from people so that people feel like they matter. That too, you are learning from the network around you. But in that process too, there's an ability to be human, to laugh, to talk about whatever has happened in the week. Approaching it in that way is sustainable. I think oftentimes we talk a lot about these complex topics, and one of the things that I think is often missing is how do we continue to sustainably ensure that you all succeed. And so for the next generation after you, right, like they're succeeding more. So it's always, and Sumi mentioned it, like we're here today because of what folks did before. And that continuum is always going to happen. I think you being intentional about the type of leader you want to be, the type of person you want to be, really makes decisions much easier. So being intentional about that, my leadership style, has really allowed me to grow.
So we are out of time. I just want to say thank you again to Dr. Juan Meng and to Missy Hill for holding space for such an incredible conversation and for giving all of us a seat at the table. Thank you to each and every one of you who listened in and asked questions. If you're able, please feel free to stick around and chat with the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here. I learned so much from all the talks, questions, discussion, okay? And I know we're running out of time, but I want to save the couple of 2 minutes first. We have prepared some Georgia goodie bags, right? We are such a great group that we cannot let our guests visiting and leaving us here without a Georgia goodie bag. So that's something we prepared for them. And the second thing I'd love to have you, if you still have a couple minutes between classes, please feel free to walk up and introduce yourself, interact with our panelists. It's such a wonderful opportunity to have them here at this moment to be with us. So thank you again, everyone, for being here.